Like Jeff said, I've been working at Broadway National Bank for 21 years. I've done everything from Novell to Microsoft Active Directory, directory services, everything from user provisioning to VMware. I'm VCP certified back in 2012, and now my focus is primarily on security. But one of the things I've always done for the bank is I've taken care of the domain purchases and the certificate purchases and that type of security infrastructure. And in this day and age right now, there's a lot of talk of, especially in the Middle East, people taking over corporations and governments by pwning their DNS, because you can point it anywhere you want once you own that DNS information, or once you get a hold of their domain registration. So, I'd like to talk first a little bit as an ad, like he said, community involvement. Get out there and help others in need. I personally do Elf Louise. If you're not from San Antonio, Elf Louise is a charity that was started by a Trinity University graduate that said, you know, there's some kids out there that are not getting presents for Christmas. And so what I end up doing is, it started in 1960, whatever. Now they serve, I can't remember how many thousands of families here in town. But I help deliver gifts for them. And there's a picture coming up here of me and Elf Louise. Yeah, that's what I look like with a full beard. And there's not a lot of white in that beard. That's just the way it grows. So, mentoring. Get out there and help somebody. Once again, find somebody to mentor them one-on-one, no matter where you are in your quest to do this journey of IT and or security. You can definitely help someone out, whether it's going to, review their resume. As a matter of fact, I'm having people review my resume because you never know when you're going to need something like that. Actually, auditors would ask us for our resumes at the bank to what we have to turn in. If you are mentoring somebody, give them some projects to work on, something that's going to be in their area or their field that they're getting into. Little encouragement goes a long way. There's an extra hit at the bottom of that. Cyber Patriot. How many people here know about Cyber Patriot, the high school teams and stuff? Yes, definitely Jeff. So San Antonio is blessed with over 300 Cyber Patriot teams at junior high school and high school levels. These kids actually do blue team work, right? Blue team is the defense of the network, right? You go out and you patch the systems, you go ahead and you configure the users correctly. That some might have excessive rights, others might need rights to go do some applications. The applications might need to be secured. And this is on Linux and on Windows. So what you do is you try and help them succeed. And they need more mentors because these teachers are not technically competent when it comes to the blue team effort that we end up doing. And literally, if you can patch a Windows server, then you can go ahead and take care of this and help them out, because that's the basic stuff that they need to know. And a lot of it's just vocabulary, right? So who can help? Everybody. It was really hard for me. I literally called up the high school that's closest to my office and said, who's the person in charge of Cyber Patriot or your computers? They put me in touch with them. They put me in touch with their Cyber Patriot team. And now I'm actually helping support 2 teams. So one of the things I found out that they needed was access to the internet, good access to the internet. I said, come to the bank. We've got Wi-Fi here. It's about 100 meg pipe square. So they worked out of the bank, and it worked really well for them. And once again, security basics. I can't say this enough to people, and I still have a lot of this I have to talk about even at my office. Security, you're never done. If I patched everything 100% and I had nothing left to patch today at the bank, there's tomorrow. Because tomorrow they're going to find something else that needs a patch. Whether it's a server, a router, a switch, some kind of configuration that somebody messed up 8 years ago that's been out there and no one knew about it. It takes lots of people to secure these things. And guess what? Those people, they need training. They really do. And that's why I come to these types of events. It's not just to take pictures. The patching will continue until security improves. I'm glad I kind of came up with that one. And it's true. Like I was saying, you can never be done when you're talking about that type of stuff. Oh, this is getting more technical, but there's like a system that Microsoft makes that patches systems, SCCM. If you look at the patch management report, you know what it says? It says, let's say 100% of the things are patched. 100% of the things it can talk to are patched, that it knows about. But if it's got a client out there that's broke, it ain't patched. So you need to have another way to validate that it's patched. So what you do is you do vulnerability management. You have some independent system that's not part of SCCM, because SCCM will lie to you because it doesn't know about all the systems that you have out there. So just some basic stuff. So how many people here own a domain or have ever done anything with a domain? So you went to GoDaddy, or you went to Hover, or you went to some company. And by the way, my big favorite right now is Hover. You get a domain for like $14 a year with privacy. So it's a very, very cost-effective way to own a couple of domains. The next thing is you have a domain registrar. And then you have DNS. A lot of people just do DNS at the domain registrar, but some people have to do it remotely, or like we did at Broadway Bank for more than a few decades, or a decade and a half. We did DNS in-house for the internet, for our own stuff. We took care of it ourselves. And the last thing is a certificate authority. Used to be VeriSign was the big one, but they shot themselves in the foot. They didn't really shoot themselves in the foot. They actually put both feet on top of each other, and they lined up at one shot where just one bullet took out both feet. And basically, they are no more. DigiCert bought their stuff, and their certs have been basically deprecated across the internet. I can't even imagine, because they printed money. How do you do that? They print money because they give you ones and zeros for lots of cash. And I don't know. Nonetheless, so those are the three major pieces. And so you need to make sure you keep all of those three major pieces secure. Because like CoinHive lost its online presence, right? They use password reuse. It's a typical problem that you see out there. They use the same user ID and password at some other place, and then somebody saw this in a breach that the bad guy got, and he logged into their stuff. And when he did, he owned them. And that's, once again, the domain registration, website, email. And you want it two-factor authentication. If it's just a username and password, that's definitely not adequate in 2019. You have to have Google Authenticator or some other type of extra factor involved in your login to all of the services that I'm talking about. Once again, your domain registration, your DNS services, and your certificate authorities. Of course, once again, personally, I don't have to get into a certificate authority. I use Let's Encrypt because it's free. So I don't have to even worry about that. It's all an API on the back end. But if you're doing it at a corporate level, like I do at work, it's really important to make sure that that stuff's really, really tight. Review the access logs of who's getting into those systems as often as you can, because that's when you're going to find out that, guess what? If they would have been doing that, like there's a bank down in Brazil that got owned. And what they did is they went in, they logged in, they could figure out that they could change their DNS information, they got out, and they didn't do anything. 3 months later, after they built a duplicate of what the bank had, they flipped the switch, and they got a bunch of people logging in and the information of their logins so they could start moving their money around at the real banking system. So, but once again, if they would have reviewed that log information of who was logging in and realized somebody did it that shouldn't have, or they had, I don't know, two-factor authentication, not a text message. NIST deprecated text messaging as a second factor, what was that, 2 years ago? At least 2 years ago. How did they pwn the guy that started Twitter, Jack Dorsey? They took over his SMS text. They cloned his phone. And it's too easy to do. That is such a thing you should never do anymore. As a matter of fact, if your bank is doing that as a second factor, please beg your bank to do something else. Google Authenticator, YubiKey, physical key for token. Once again, two-factor everything. Those that don't know what a YubiKey is, this is the YubiKey. It just looks like a little USB key. It's got a gold disc on it. They're not cheap. They're like $50 for this one. But you get 2 of these guys, and I log in and I tell Google, this is what I am, this is my physical token, and I could leave it plugged in the computer, it doesn't do anything, because I haven't figured out how the hacker can go and touch this little gold disc remotely. So unless they can figure out how to do that, I could leave it in the computer, I'm still good. I don't leave it in the computer because that's just bad practice. But you could, because they have to touch the thing to make it actually give you the random number. Are y'all familiar with these things? Because it's the way to go. They make some lesser devices than the YubiKey, but they have more limited functionality. And I don't want to be limited, but they do have a couple of other companies that make these for like $20 that are pretty adequate. At least they're better than your SMS text message. And who takes them? Google, Twitter, Facebook. They're all capable of using a YubiKey as a second factor. Oh, a LastPass. Once again, password managers, right? Once again, log changes, monitor the logs. So I grew up in the 1970s, and high technology for a kid in the 70s is the phone system, right? That was my thing. And so how would you look up a phone number in the 1970s? You grab the phone book. They publish those things every year, right, here in San Antonio. Am I in it? And so you'd have to go to the right page, and you look it up, and you take a name, and you put it into a number, right? Next, if you call the number often enough, you might write it down near the phone. Finally, you're going to do it so often, you're going to remember it and be able to recall it quickly. That's like a DNS lookup. When you look something up in the phone book, that's like you're going to the phone book to figure out where does Broadway.bank resolve to a number. Finally, next, if you write it down, let's say it's something that you put in your host file, which is a specific file on whether it's a Linux computer or a Windows computer. There's a file called host. If you put the IP address, space, and the name, I got that backwards. The name, the space, and the IP address. It will go, and every time you're looking for that name, it'll go there first. That's like writing it down near the phone book. Finally, if you use it, it's going to be like cached in your memory of your computer, or it's going to be cached in the DNS server nearby. And then you'll be able to get it quicker because it doesn't have to go through the host lookup or the lookup to the phone book or DNS itself. What's the first phone number y'all learned? I'm just curious. Anybody? What? 911, that's cool. See, you're younger, right? A lot of people say their house, right? But I didn't know my house phone number. The number I knew was 223, try this one more time, 226-3232. Frostbank Time and Temp, right? I work at Broadway, but as a little kid, I'd call Frostbank Time and Temp because they'd talk to me, right? They'd go like, hey, Time and Temp is this, and, you know, please bank at Frostbank. So the internet is governed by a bunch of documents. The documents are called requests for comment. RFCs. So everything that's done, whether it's TCP/IP or whatever, has an RFC behind it. And if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of how things work, you start reading these RFCs, and you really can get a good handle on it. DNS is governed by some really old RFCs from 1987. So what makes DNS quick? And the simple answer is UDP protocol. UDP protocol is connectionless. I took it off. There's a vendor around the corner that's giving away these blinky badges that says TCP/IP or TCP/IP, and it's got the header information. If you take about 70% of that away, that's a UDP packet. They're very fast. They don't care about if service. They don't care about all this other stuff. They just want to get that packet out there. So they're really good for things like audio or video, things that are fast one way. And if you drop a few packets, it's not going to matter. You might get a little bit of jitter in the video, or you hear a little jitter in the phone call, but it's not going to kill it, right? So, but the deal is, you're just throwing it out there, and the first person that answers your packet wins in UDP. So if that first person is a bad guy running a Wi-Fi pineapple, then you might get the wrong information in your DNS. What makes it secure? Not much. Once again, it's easily intercepted. DNS is easily fooled, and it's just easily manipulated by bad people, as well as just misconfigured as well. So once again, spoofing, poisoning. Poisoning is where I answer faster and I give you the wrong answer. And you can be used for DDoS attacks. Let's go through the DNS process. Let's say a user types in uscyberpatriot.org into their favorite browser, links. Probably not, you don't know what links is, do you? Before there was like web browsers that had images, it was a text-based browser. Yes, text. So, look that up in the history. You had a links browser, I'm sure, Jeff. Absolutely, I did too. Yeah, back when I had a shell account. So, first thing it's going to do when you put in uscyberpatriot.org, it's going to go, is this resolvable in the host file? Okay, no, it's not. Next thing it's going to do, it's going to look in the local cache. Is it in memory on the computer? If it is, then it's going to retrieve it there and go ahead and go there. It's looking for that IP address. Finally, it's going to ask DNS. Whatever your DNS information is set up in your computer, it's going to ask those IP addresses. The resolver is going to send a recursive query to the DNS server. DNS server checks its cache to see if it's something that somebody's asked for recently. Then your DNS server, if it's not in cache, it's going to go and ask for help. So what's it going to do? It's going to make an iterative query to the root servers. So these I think 12 now, 12 servers at the top of the food chain that are the root DNS servers for, let's say, .com. Or in this case, .org. So it's going to go find the servers for .org, and it's going to ask those, hey, I'm looking for the IP address for uscyberpatriot.org. So that's going to make an iterative query to the authoritative name server, uscyberpatriot.org. So that's like going to the bank and asking, hey, I want a dub. Okay? That's going to go ahead and respond back with the IP address, and the DNS server updates its cache. So now it's in memory. Then it's going to send it to your computer. Your computer is going to go ahead and update its cache and provide the proper IP address to your browser. Now you can go ahead and get on uscyberpatriot.org and sign up, hopefully become a mentor. Now that you understand kind of quickly how DNS works, how it goes and looks up the IP address locally, looks it in the host file, looks at it in DNS. DNS goes up and grabs it if the root servers, which goes back down to the individual server that kins back the IP address. That happens so fast. And once again, it's UDP. It's really impressive. DNSSEC. When people think of this at first, especially at my bank, they were thinking, oh, it's like DNS and security. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not a panacea. There are some drawbacks to it. So let's start doing DNSSEC now. Matter of fact, the country of Sweden is pretty much, that's all they do. They don't even do anything less than that. So it's TCP and not UDP. That means we have to do the TCP three-way handshake, right? So I got to establish a connection with that server. The server's got to talk to me. I got to say we're good, everything's fine. Now we can pass data between us. So that makes it a little slower, but once again, considering the high-speed internet that we have today, that's not that much of a burden. Oh, this one's just pains me. Some domain registrars have poor and or really stupid support for DNSSEC. And this is where I'd like to name names. Yes, Network Solutions, I'm talking to you. To put DNSSEC information in my domain registrar at Network Solutions for my bank, I have to send them an email. They don't have an interface that I could put that number directly into the system. I literally have to send it an email, which goes to a queue, which some person finally gets around to doing only from 8 to 5 Eastern time during the week. And it is just insane. It's absolutely insane. You don't have to do that if I go to Hover. I don't have to there's a form to fill out. I can just put the number in, it's there. But these guys at Network Solutions, now owned by Web.com, are complete morons. They had this problem 4 years ago. I complained about it when I first started doing it. They have that problem today because I just did it last month. Oh, you have no idea the frustration. Because sitting around and twiddling my thumbs and waiting for them, and sometimes if they don't respond back with an email, for days. Did they put it in? Did they not? I'll check it. It's a mess. It is just a mess. So they're about ready. Matter of fact, probably next month, I'm going to do my darndest to make sure they lose the business of the Broadway Bank. And by the way, they were the only domain registrar available in '98 when we put these things in. And so that's how long we've been using them. They've lost us as a customer because they cannot keep up with technology. Isn't that sad? Ugh. So proper signing can be difficult and tedious when done by hand. And once again, this man, Jeff Rich, is the only person I've ever met in the entire planet that has self-signed or hand-signed a DNSSEC record. Normally, you just offload that to somebody that does it for a living. GoDaddy, Dyn, VeriSign, not VeriSign. VeriSign's out of the DNS business as of this past month. Ultra DNS is another company that you could use. It used to be I would be leery of telling what company the Broadway Bank uses for DNS, but either you can easily find that out by looking at our Whois records because it says Ultra DNS all over it, or you don't know how to find out what a Whois record is, and then I don't have to really worry about you hacking me at all because that's pretty basic stuff. Get your domain registrar on board, or better yet, like I'm going to do, go get another domain registrar. You need the delegation of signing, delegation of, get that right, of signing record, and you get that from the servers, the DNS servers that you're going to be hosted on. So when I was at VeriSign, their server gave me a particular set of hash of what that key is. When I moved to Ultra DNS, that hash changed because it's on a different server. They have a different signature that they're going by, or different key that they're going by for those servers. So I needed to get that key from them. So I get that key, or that hash information, and I send it up to my Whois information. Once again, through Network Solutions, it's a stupid process where I email it. Within Circa, which is what we use for .bank, I'm able to put that in a form and upload it immediately, and actually be able to see my changes happen immediately. How you did it, you probably self-signed it, then it gave you the key, then you had to go put it up there, and you had to get all the numbers right, and you did it by command line. You're insane. DNSSEC, why do it at all? All answers that are DNSSEC are protected. They're digitally signed. So if they're altered in any way, you'll know. And your browsers in the future will be able to look at that and say that we're not going to accept that. Or there is a special case, which I'll mention in a little while, I'll mention in a little while, that you, unless it's signed properly, you will not get an answer on DNS. And once again, future resolvers are going to look at DNSSEC closer, so they can take care of it at the browser end, not the server end or top-level domain, like I'll talk about in a second. So you get integrity, right? Those records are signed, you know they're not tampered with, and you know that they're valid. So if you go to Broadway.bank, you're well assured that you're going to go to Broadway.bank. You're going to go to wherever the DNS says, because it is signed. To be a .bank, when we moved there, you had to have DNSSEC. It was not an option. It wasn't something you could turn off. It was done. Because the top-level domain for .bank mandates it. So it gives a little bit of extra assurance that if you're someplace and you're asking for the bank, you're going to get there. I'm not trying to plug my bank. I'm really trying to plug DNS because it's pretty cool the way that that works. Because my .coms and my .nets, I cannot be that assured that that's the case. I can do DNSSEC with them, but it's not as sure as the top-level domain bought into it. Once again, DNS data is not encrypted to the end user, and this is getting a little bit dated now, and you can still get a DNS DOS attack depending on, we used to have our DNS at our bank. It was down a tiny little 30 meg pipe, and to be able to DDoS us would have been so easy, but nobody ever did. Thank you, Lord. While we had it on-prem, or it would have been so simple just to blow the bank off the internet, but thank God it never happened. Now, of course, being externally hosted and all these other DDoS mitigation tools and everything, it gets us in a lot better posture than we are when we're down this tiny little straw of a network that most people have bigger than that at their house. So confidentially invalidate, availability, check out the work done. Oh, that's right, some of these new resolvers. So some of the other talks that have been going on here this last couple of days, yesterday and today, talked about DOE, which is DNS over HTTPS. Firefox and Chrome are both going that way, where they're going to do that by default very soon in the future. So that makes it harder for your provider of your internet to watch where you go on the internet. Every single time you ask for a DNS request for anything that you go to on the internet, your internet provider is watching that traffic and making a log of where you go, so it can target you for market and sell you as the information data store that you are, right? Yeah. What's that? Yeah, it's pretty simple. Well, no, if you want to, you can turn it on right now. Yeah, no, they didn't. No, they were supposed to turn it on already, but they haven't turned it on. But the tools are in there. You can go look up how to turn on DNS over HTTPS. And there's actually like, I think 6 different things you have to change inside the browser for Firefox. And I can't remember if you have to get the beta of Chrome. I'm not familiar with that one, but I have done it in Firefox. It's pretty nice. And you can actually, most times they tell you to put it in a mode that if you can't get the information securely from DNS over HTTPS, then fail over to just normal DNS. Nah, either you get it via HTTPS or you fail. And I think that's option 3 inside of Firefox versus option 2. Oh yeah, every time you get an update, you have to go and check your numbers. And the problem is sometimes you get updates and it's like the browser just updated. You don't know, so you have to keep an eye on those things. DNSSEC, just do it, right? Top level domains make a demands. If you're .insurance or .bank, you have to do it. I'm a bank. The bank is governed, not governed, but assessed by auditors using the FFIEC cybersecurity assessment tool. So we have to keep up with that information. And then one of the lines, the whole thing that started with DNSSEC for us is one of the lines in there. It says, do you do DNSSEC? And we're like, no, but we could. And then we ended up going to .bank, which facilitated, mandated it. But so that checked a good box off that a lot of banks don't have, and other financial institutions in this town alone. Matter of fact, if you look, Broadway Bank probably, not probably, has the cleanest DNSSEC information of all the financial institutions, including USAA. I'm very happy about that. My little bank. It's because I'm so just like detail oriented. I really want to make sure that it's as best it possibly can be for our customers. So this DNSSEC thing, it's security right. Yeah, sort of, but it's not a panacea. You do have some trade-offs. It's a little bit slower, a little bit more cumbersome. It's a lot more work on the department's end to do, but in the end, there are some serious benefits out of it. You can do browser plugins to see if it's really DNSSEC. I've done that. Oh, and this is my favorite. I like challenges. You know, it's like, hey, can we do this? Yeah, we can do this. You know, so I just dug into it and ended up doing it. It doesn't matter. You know, you're going to find out if you do IT for very long. There are times that you just have a passion for something. You want to go for it and make that thing happen. And I ran with this as the ball, and it kind of championed it at my bank. So now that you do DNSSEC, there's another thing you can do. So I go to a website. Oh yeah, DNS, whatever, TLSA records. I go to a website, and I can have a TLSA record. And the TLSA record will have information in DNS that's like, hey, you got a port, a protocol, and a URL, and then a hash of the public certificate. So what that does is pretty neat. You can go ahead and, you know, I could use my deal. And that's kind of what it looks like, right? I'm going to do a quick mod here. So it's port 443, right? And it's going to US Cyber Patriot, and it's using TCP protocol, and it's got some TLSA information on it. Here, I'll do this. Okay. Not that deal, this deal. So, yeah, I could just be in presenter mode, right? Yeah. And so this is the hash of Cyber Patriot, or what looks like one. So what can Dane do for you? Let's say you're trying to get to example.com. You look up example.com. We kind of talked about the DNS process. And then you go to the website, because you have its IP address now, right? And then example.com comes back with TCP on port 443, example.com. And you get the secure information, so you know that there's a certificate there, and you get a SHA-256 of their public certificate. Then you can ask for the TLSA record from DNSSEC and say, look, hey, the DNSSEC information that's secured, and you know it's right because it's got a signature on it, matches the certificate that I got from the website. Well, that's great. Then I know I got the right website. I know that there's not somebody with a Wi-Fi pineapple in there that's man-in-the-middling me and giving me a website that they think it's my bank, but it's not my bank, right? So having TLSA records is a really good thing because it goes on top of DNSSEC. They're digitally signed, and they are just a signature of what you got. Well, they match. Yay! So this is what happens if they don't match. A Wi-Fi pineapple, as you might know, I haven't seen too many around this particular security conference, but I have seen them at security conferences. They intercept the information, and then they can force your computer to go to sites that you would think would be the correct ones, but they're actually might be spoofed. They might be trying to steal your credentials or whatever else that they're doing as research or whatever. So, so is the DNS record you received real, or is it from some pineapple that's on somebody's backpack or something walking around? Here's a backpack. Look, there's only 8 antennas hanging out of it. I wonder what they're doing. This was at B-Sides a year and a half ago. And technically what the guy was doing was really impressive. He was actually listening to satellites, satellite telephone communications. And he was decoding their SMS messages. Yeah, that's why you don't use SMS, kids. So, is the certificate authority trustworthy? A certificate authority gave out a valid certificate for your domain to a bad actor. How do you know? How can you tell? I mean, it could be GitHub. Accidentally, the root certificate got issued to a user of GitHub. They're meant to do like fred.github.com, and they ended up giving away github.com. And that's happened for Google as well over the years. So can you tell that the certificate you got is from the website that you're expecting it from? Once again, the TLSA record will tell you, because if it doesn't match what you have inside of DNS that the company or the individual put up there, and they don't match, there's a mismatch, then you know that there's something wrong. So Dane requires DNSSEC. It's pretty easy. You just go and get the PEM file, which is that signature, and you put in the proper numbers. Matter of fact, there's a checker for it here. I'll show it to you. There it is. That's how you get it. So you just punch in the right numbers. I think I do 301 because I use the full certificate. And then I paste the PEM format in here, and then it spits out this thing where it says 443 TCP. Oh yeah, it asks for the port number and the TCP or UDP or whatever domain name. And then you punch out all that information, then you put that up in a TLSA record inside of your DNS provider, and it gives you that extra, once again, level of assurance. Test your TLSA record, because a bad TLSA record is worse than having no record at all. Because then you're saying that, hey, this is bad all the time. So you go test it at Dane Tools, and there's browser plugins available for that as well. And so this is what a valid TLSA record looks like. Using that particular tool. CAA records. This is a relatively new record. This has only been around for about 2 years. I love this record. This record has saved me so much grief. There's this thing called Shadow IT, and believe it or not, they give credit cards to people at your companies, and they go and buy things, and they try and set them up and stuff, and you might not know it because what are you? You're just a security guy in IT. What would you need to know? Well, this kind of stuff happens, and this is a good thing to catch it. TLSA, a CAA record is really simple. It says who can provide certificates to your organization. And if I specify that exactly in this CAA record, if somebody tries to go get a Let's Encrypt certificate for my domain, it will fail. Or any other type of thing. Let's say they hired we've come up with a new domain for a new function at our bank or whatever company. The person in charge of it subcontracted out the browser or the website and all this other stuff to some company. I tell the company, hey, you need a certificate for this domain, you talk to me. 2 weeks later, hey man, I'm trying to set up a cert and it's not working. Where did you get a cert? Me. So, there's only 3 fields. They're really simple: issue wild, and IODEF. As of 2017, all certificate authorities have to accept and honor CAA records, or they get blown away by Google and Firefox and everybody else. You don't want to tick off those guys, right? So, I thought I had an example of the record. But basically, like mine says, we only buy certificates from DigiCert. That's it. And we will buy domain or issue wild. So it's like, let's say Broadway.bank, star.broadway.bank. And if anybody tries to create a certificate that at any other place, we get an email, and that IODEF is the email address that they send that information to. And that's really handy because it really, with Shadow IT, this stops a lot of that from happening. And because it's honored, if you're a certificate authority and you violate that, the browsers will stop using you. They'll pull you out of the rootless system. So now I have a painful DNSSEC part. So we're .bank, right? And before I go to questions, .bank top level domain is mandates your DNSSEC always be on. I did not know until 3 weeks ago what I'm going to tell you, which there's 2 types of DNSSEC. I've been using it for 4 years, but there's 2 types. There's INSEC opt-out. That's the typical one. That's the one you get with .com, .net, whatever, .org. INSEC opt-out. What that means is you can have it on, you can have it off. You can do DNSSEC or you can not do DNSSEC, and what will happen is you'll always get an answer. And so if you take your domain, your DS keys out of your domain provider and you don't have them there, that means you turn DNSSEC off. You could still go to your websites. You can still get your MX record. You can still do all this other stuff. 3 weeks ago on Friday night, literally 3 weeks ago tonight, at about midnight, I'm working on the system because I'm moving DNS providers for my .bank. The night before, I did my .coms and .nets. Got rid of those keys, started moving the stuff over to the new domain DNS provider. No problem. .bank, midnight, Friday night. I go in there and I take the DS keys out of the system and go to bed. I get up about 3 or 4 hours later and whatever. And I look at my phone and it says, I can't deliver email because you don't have an MX record. I was pale and instantly woke up. Oh my God, why can't it get to my MX record? Why can't it look up anything at Broadway.bank? Because I blew the bank off the internet, basically. When I got rid of those keys, it uses INSEC no opt-out. INSEC 3, NSEC number 3 dash no opt-out. That's mandated by the top level domain. You can't turn off for a .bank DNSSEC. If you take those keys out or there's not keys that are valid in there going to valid servers to valid records, you're not on the internet. I DOSed my bank. Bad. So, panic. Calling up my DNS provider, trying to figure out what I did. I didn't really equate it to taking the keys out because I did it the night before for the .coms and .nets. I'm thinking I'm golden, right? No, that's exactly what happened. Now that I realized that what I did, now I got to put the keys back in. Panic ensues even more for me because every time you put the keys in the form, by the way, thank God this wasn't Network Solutions, because I'd have to email them on Monday and the bank would be out for the whole weekend. But it's in Circa and I have a form I can fill out, right? So I go to the form and I go to fill it out, and every single time you take a change, you have to put your second factor in, which is a rolling code, of course, and not Google Authenticator, but it's just about as good. You know, it's another rolling code type system. And so, okay, I made all the changes. I get the form filled out, and okay, my number's getting ready to read. Okay, I get the new number. I type in the number real quick. Boom, enter. Fail. What happened? And this went on for like 15 or 20 minutes. I tried it over and over and over, and I'm talking to support of my DNS provider, but not in Circa on the phone. I can't even get in Circa on the phone until Monday. Once again, this is early in the morning on Saturday morning. Finally, I'm talking to the guy, and I notice I get to the end of the time of the token, and I hit enter. It took it. Their clocks are off. The clocks are off. Whatever server is supposed to take that second factor was wrong. Now I know what the problem is. I wait till the end of the deal, and I, boom, enter and make the next change that I need to make. And then finally get the third key and stuff in there. And we start, the guy on the phone with me, we're starting to do a dig to see if those records show up, and they start showing up, and the WHOIS information starts showing up properly. And we're like, oh, thank God, the bank's going to be okay again. And things are still broken, because now I have to wait for those records to propagate across the internet. So he's got a tool where he can go in and query all these DNS servers all over the world. And it starts asking, so it's filling in that cache information, right, of the new records. So that's really started making things alive. So finally it's about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm, whew, because literally this is like a resume generating event to take a bank down for a whole weekend. Yeah, I was really worried. And got it all back up and running, and then I did the right thing, right? At 9:30, I started typing in an email that was relatively long and very detailed of, don't ever do this. Don't do this thing. If you do this thing, you will DOS the bank, you know, and stuff. And that's the reason. I mean, you have to have security around things. You have to have two-factor around things. You have to have good clocks over at the other provider. And all these things, because you really want to try and provide the most secure way that people can get to their stuff. Does anybody have any questions about DNS or anything? I know I kind of went through it kind of quick, but it's really, it's a great set of tools, way to keep things up, running, and secure for your company. Like I said, there's something called DNSViz, DNSVIZ, I think .net. That's a tool you can go to look at someone's DNSSEC information, and it's very visual. It shows, here's your, let's say, .bank top-level domain, and here's the next one down where you pass off the primary key to the secondary key. Then finally, it's Broadway.bank, and you can see all the arrows connected to all the different records and stuff. And it also gives you errors and stuff on the side of anything you got wrong. Oh, I got 10 minutes left? Okay. The last thing is a key role, I'd like to mention just briefly. Most of the keys that are out there that are DNSSEC are SHA-2. That's being deprecated, and everything's moving to elliptical curve encryption for the keys. So inside the key has the encryption, which, by the way, SHA-2 is considered the number 8. I don't know why. They just picked 8. And the new one is 13. So I'm rolling my keys right now to the new ECC elliptical curve certificates. To do that, once again, I can't turn it off. So I have to generate the new keys, get the new keys, put the new keys in the domain registration, leave all the old keys and the new keys there for 48 hours. Everything propagates. Then I can go and delete the old keys, and then I have to delete the old keys out of DNS. So it's like a 13-step process to do that. But you know, it's one of the things you got to do if you want to maintain a high degree of security for your DNS and DNS records. Once again, does anybody have any questions or anything about any of this? Yes, ma'am. Okay, for common threat for against DNSSEC, well, probably the most common would be a DDoS attack, depending on where your DNS servers are. If you're having a really large company, like Dyn or like us at Ultra or VeriSign prior, it's much better there because we're not even in their background noise compared to the larger companies that are getting DDoSed on a regular basis that hit their systems. So that's probably, denial of service is probably the biggest thing. That's what happened when there was the big East Coast denial of service that happened a few years ago because they attacked Dyn. They took out all the DNS record lookups for the East Coast that used that particular provider, which was quite a bit. But thank God they're mitigating that the best they can. And once again, these Middle Eastern groups and other groups that are attacking different DNS, if you don't have two-factor on your domain registration, your DNS, your certificate authority, then you're not going to be able to do it. Oh, and my CAA record says like DigiCert. At DigiCert, I have multiple factors of authentication, and I have to re-authenticate the ability to get the certificates on a regular basis to them that I am who I am for the bank. Because once again, it's not just that DigiCert is my provider. DigiCert knows that there's a small group of people that have the authorization and rights to get those certs. Because once again, if you have the certificate for Broadway.bank, you own the bank, basically. So, anything else?
So is it considered DNS poisoning someone just attacks the user and puts whatever kind of junk into that host.txt file? Is that DNS poisoning?
No, that is just a straight up attack on the host file. Because literally, if you get, once again, like you're poisoning DNS, that would be if you're capturing that data and you're answering first before the actual people are supposed to answer. When you're attacking, like putting, filling in data into the host file, like, oh, Facebook's not over there, it's over here. But once again, Facebook's going to want to have that certificate for Facebook that you end up going to, or they do port 80 and then you start seeing things in your browser that it's not secure. The other thing, of course, is if you are running HTTPS on your website, every single element on that page must be HTTPS. If you have one element or one thing in one script that connects to something that's HTTP, no more lock, no more happiness, no more green bar, no more whatever, you're going to get the I in the circle on your browser if it's Chrome. How do I know that? Yeah, I got a marketing department, baby. Oh, yeah.
Typical DNS poisoning attack. And you mentioned something a minute ago about taking out all the East Coast, and you mentioned something else about whoever so major food authorities. Where's the common DNS poisoning attack happen? Does it happen at individual ISPs?
Starbucks. Well, I mean, a good way to put it, Starbucks, public Wi-Fi, any of that kind of thing where that's the most common place to do DNS poisoning. A form of DNS poisoning happens sometimes by your ISP because they want you to see ads from a certain place and they'll inject ads in the system. So they'll, like, even though the web page doesn't have ads on it, they can push an ad with the stream of data that comes back. That's not DNS poisoning, that's just mean. Because I pay them for that damn service. So, you know, it's really, you know, I don't know what we're going to do about ISPs. But so DNS poisoning, for the most part, is the first person that answers the query wins. And if it's a bad guy, that's bad. That's primarily, once again, with UDP. But if you're doing DNS over HTTPS, and you're doing it where it only lets that DNS over HTTPS, that means you're going to get it from whoever your provider is, and they can't man in the middle of that information because they won't be able to get that DNS over HTTPS to work. Yeah, if you're specifying, I'm going there to get my DNS records, that's it. And I am out of time, but yes, sir. No, really, do you have something? Okay. Thank you all very much, and I hope this was able to be informative and help you all out. And if you do DNSSEC, keep your jobs. Please, do whatever you can to keep your jobs. Don't do what I did.